I'd like to introduce Debbie from England, who has multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Debbie.
Hello, Linda.
Could you tell me when you first started to notice MS symptoms?
It was actually in my mid-20s, which is almost 20 years ago, and I just became very, very ill after a bad bout of flu and was misdiagnosed as having ME. Carried on being misdiagnosed for all that length of time up until about 5 or 6 years ago, when I had problems with my hands, which weren't working properly, balance. I was getting very bad muscle cramps. My brain wasn't working, and I couldn't understand language, things like that, and other neurological symptoms. Shoulder froze up, and at that time, because I trained in holistic therapies, I realised something neurological was going on, and so I asked for a neurological consult when I was diagnosed about 5 or 6 years ago as having MS rather than ME.
Mm-hmm. Was that a relief to actually get a diagnosis, as a name to what?
Yes, a huge relief, really, in many ways, because I'd had, when I was first ill and diagnosed with ME, I was actually in a wheelchair. I was very, very ill for about, housebound for about 3 years. And I had a lot of cognitive symptoms, which were really very difficult to cope with, language issues, just basic doing joined-up thinking was completely impossible. And as a consequence of that, experienced secondary depression and was diagnosed as being having ME and being a depressive, and was basically ignored by the medical profession and also given short shrift whenever I needed any help because I was a depressive, and I was basically thrown on the scrap heap like a lot of people with ME are. And so I had a very difficult time, and I was sent to a psychiatrist and all kinds of things, until finally I decided that the medical profession really weren't worth the time I was giving them, and there were actually any of the medications they were giving me were making me worse. Their opinion of me and their attitude towards me was very damaging to my self-worth and the way I felt about myself. And so I'd actually abandoned the medical profession completely, and I managed my health holistically, and actually got myself out of the wheelchair, got myself back to a level of functioning, but was never back to the way I was before I became first ill. But I had all these ongoing symptoms like fatigue that would just floor an elephant, that they put down to being a depressive and needing to get out more and get on with life and stop all this being sick kind of approach. And also cognitive issues, language deficit and language dysphasia, which often meant that I couldn't read material, couldn't understand written material, couldn't communicate verbally, and it still happens now, but to a much, much lesser degree. Whereas if I got tired, I just couldn't understand any kind of verbal language or communicate, and I would be talking gibberish and not know I was talking gibberish. I thought I was speaking sensibly, and then my husband would look at me blankly, and I'd go, "Oh yes, okay, so those words aren't coming out today." Or I couldn't structure sentences, couldn't find the right word on occasions. And also things like my memory, which is better now since I started the LDN, but my memory was also very poor, and my concentration was very fractured. So all those things were going on, along with ongoing things like muscle and nerve pain, which would come and go in quite strong bouts, vertigo, dizziness, which would sometimes just floor me for a week, and fatigue, this ongoing fatigue that would just lay me out most of the time. So I had all those ongoing symptoms, and receiving no help from the medical profession, and so I learned to manage it myself until I kind of my health. I decided I was going to do some more courses and do some more training and really start into holistic therapy or work, which I adore. I'm trained in a lot of therapies. And the increase in the workload just overloaded my system, and I had a major relapse, and shoulder froze up, and all these other neurological stuff started happening, and that's when I was diagnosed. So it was a huge relief to lose this for want of a better word and without denigrating anybody else, this nutter tag, because, you know, you're tossed on the scrap heap as being a nutter, needing to get on with life. And so I lost that. And then suddenly all these doors opened where I was actually receiving support and help and explanations of why things were happening. It also made sense then, because all the symptoms I'd had, which didn't fit with ME, fell into place. So in a way it was a great relief. And it was quite cathartic, because I could let go of a lot of the negative stuff that I'd developed in myself, and negative self-opinion that I'd kind of taken on from other people, with having this label of having ME and really just being a depressive, you know. So it was, yes, a big... That was a very long way to say, yes, it was a big relief. But
so how did you hear about LDN?
I was having a really tough time, and went searching for something which might help me. But I actually came across it by accident, because I was having a tough time with some symptoms that at that time my neurologist said weren't MS. Things like speech difficulties, memory loss, cognitive issues. I have since changed my neurologist on the advice of other people, because she was appalling. I mean, things like, she said that swallowing difficulties and choking fits had nothing to do with the MS, which of course we all know is complete rubbish. It's absolutely due to the MS. And I was actually searching to research what was going on with me if these symptoms weren't MS, and I came across LDN on the MS Resource Centre's website.
Yes.
Found that, and I thought, that sounds interesting, but I'm very drug intolerant, so I wasn't that keen on taking anything. But I thought, it's worth researching. So I did some more surfing, and it was just on the net. And then I bought the book, The Promise of Naltrexone, and thought, this is worth pursuing. And so started to just kind of generally have a think about it. I thought about it for a long time before I actually started taking it. But that's a whole other story.
So how did you manage to obtain a prescription for LDN?
Oh, that was good fun, yes. Well, first of all, tried my first neurologist, and that was an outright no. Just, we don't prescribe that. That was it. That was the sole length of the conversation. And then when I got my new neurologist, my second one, he said, no, we have, the neurologist in Greater Manchester has decided that we will not prescribe LDN because there are insufficient studies and scientific proof that it does any work. But I'll give you gabapentin, which is a horrendous drug. I'm sure you've heard of it. We'll give you that, even though that has toxic side effects and is only effective, I think, in 20% of the patients that they actually prescribe for nerve pain. And it's horrendously expensive too. So he'd happily discard. And it's also not on label for MS, which was his other argument, that LDN was not on label for MS. But he'd happily prescribe me all this other stuff that and also amitriptyline, which I've reacted to very badly in the past. He'd give me that for the pain, but he wouldn't give me this non-toxic, cheap, generic drug. So I went back to your site, actually, and it was one of my favourite sites when I was Googling around. Found the, there was a little sign that had been posted, Clinic 158, it will now prescribe LDN, because my GP also wouldn't prescribe it. But he was, he came from a position of, he knew nothing about LDN. He wasn't happy with his knowledge of MS sufficiently to be able to prescribe something like LDN off-label, and he was worried that perhaps I was grabbing hold of straws, and he didn't want, he would prefer me to go to somebody who knew what they were doing with it rather than give it to me inappropriately. So I didn't mind his response at all, and so I got in touch with Clinic 158, and Andy McCall's been looking after me ever since.
Only thing is, he's not taking on any more patients, so I think we're going to have to take him out of that, if you don't mind.
Not at all, not at all, but he's a lovely man.
He is a lovely man, and he'd get quite upset. So I'm sorry, Simon, that bit's going to have to come out. Simon's the one who's editing it, so that's fine. We can take that bit out. Okay, so if you can say, because obviously that bit's going to have to come out. When I'll ask you the question again, and if you can just add, you had to obtain a private prescription.
Okay. That's fine.
How did you manage to obtain a prescription?
Well, after my neurologist refused me and my GP refused me, I basically got a private prescription.
And where did you have your private prescription filled?
Dixon's in Glasgow. They are wonderful people. Do a superb job.
Thank you. They are, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay. So I said as well. God, mustn't keep saying
Don't ever play this back to me. I'll die.
I'll play it back to you when it's edited and it will look really posh. When you first started LDN, did you have any introductory side effects?
Yes, I did. I felt it was very peculiar. I got about 10 days of really bad insomnia, which was quite difficult to cope with because insomnia is one of the things that I've had since I was first in my 20s. So I had to actively manage my sleep regime. But then after about 10 days, that wore off. And I had like 2 weeks of feeling okay, and then 2 weeks where it was like my immune system kind of switched on or changed. I felt quite fluey. Not terribly bad, but, off and scruffy around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened for the first 3 months, because each month we increased the dose by 0.5 a milligram. Mm-hmm. And that happened for the first 3 months. So we left, after 3 months, we left it at the same dose for a couple of months. And then when I increased it again up to 4.5, it was fine, and I didn't get any symptoms at all, any side effects at all. But I am very drug intolerant, and so for me to get off lightly like that I was quite surprised that I didn't get any worse side effects. So that was all really.
How long did it take before you started to notice improvements?
They were subtle at first, and because I increased the dosage quite slowly over months. I would say about 3 months, and it was subtle because it was cognitive. It affected my cognitive function first, and I suddenly realised that I could speak more easily, that my language flow was much easier and much better, and I didn't have these episodes where people would be talking to me and all I could hear was the noise and not understand the words, and that was quite significant. And I also realised that my memory was getting a lot better, and I was able to focus more and remember that I actually had gone out for bread instead of coming home with apples and things like that. So that I'd say about 3 months, and it was the cognitive side that was affected first.
So what would you say LDN has done for you?
It hasn't been a miracle drug, but it has improved my cognitive function and language use, and reading as well. I find it easier to understand what I'm reading, because in the past there have been weeks or periods of days and weeks where I've just not been able to read because I couldn't understand what I was reading, which, considering I have a degree in education and used to teach kids, was a bit disconcerting. But definitely cognitive function, language use, memory, general level of robustness, stamina is better. Though my energy is still low, I still get very bad fatigue, which is the biggest problem I have. I'm on more of an even keel, and if I rest appropriately and actively manage my activity and balance it with rest, I'm on a much more even keel. So I'll recover more quickly if I get overtired, which is something which is quite novel after years of being floored for a week for doing very little sometimes. That's a great improvement. Nerve pain as well. I'd say that the nerve pain is a lot better. And I'd say, I think the main thing for me is that for a long, long time, especially when I was first diagnosed about 4 or 5 years ago, I would often feel very fluish, as if my immune system was kicking off for no apparent reason. And if I got tired, I would often feel as if I had a flu coming on and feel just awful. just from that kind of immune feel. And that has really gone, apart from when I get a little flare up, like just this week. I've overdone it, my own fault. And I'm kind of getting a bit of a flare-up, so I'm taking it easy. And I felt very kind of immune responsive then, but it's died down much more quickly than it ever did before.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, I just generally don't feel as ill as I did, apart from when I overdo it, which is my own fault because I'm mismanaging. So I think that's probably most important for me.
What would you say to other people who've got MS who are contemplating trying LDN?
Check it out. Check out LDN. Don't grab at miracle cures, but this can certainly help. I think it can help a lot of people that are often stuck in a rut and stuck in a deep, dark pit and taking medication, which just makes things worse. My brother is in that pit. He has MS, and he's in a progressive MS, and he's just being poisoned by so many toxic drugs that are just taking him further and further down into the pit. So check it out. Make sure that you're willing to give it a go. Don't expect miracle cures, a week after taking it. Some people do get that response, but a lot of people won't. So give it a good long time, maybe 6 months to see what will happen with it. And then just have a go at it with an open mind and see where it'll take you, because you might be really surprised.
Well, thank you, Debbie, very much for sharing your experience with us.